Hey everybody, welcome to Frontline. We're back with another e-panel. This time we have the writer, creator, Cullen Bunn, who's going to be here talking about his book Regression, and we're going to be fielding some questions from the viewer questions. Anybody who doesn't know what e-panel is the thing that we do from time to time where we have a creator on and we set up like a Comic Con type panel where anybody's free to ask questions and talk to Cullen Bunn in this case. So on the panel tonight we have myself, we have Kat Comic Uno.
Hey guys.
We have Brant Fowler, Gonzo Goose.
Hey everybody.
And we have Mike Spider Slayer.
Maybe if Mike.
Hi guys, I didn't know if you were going to add anything else to it, Jason. Hey guys.
Just waiting for the whole introduction.
And then our guest of honor tonight is Cullen Bunn. So Cullen, want to introduce yourself to the viewers and tell them what you have coming out?
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with my work, I'm a comic book writer. I work on a number of books, both for Marvel and Dark Horse and Oni Press and Boom and Aftershock and everybody else. I do a lot of creator-owned books as well as a number of Marvel comics. I write X-Men Blue for Marvel. I write a lot of the Deadpool minis for Marvel. Tomorrow I have my first Image book coming out, which is a book called Regression. And I also do a number of books like Harrow County for Dark Horse and The Damned for Oni Press.
Cool. So we're going to get right into the questions, and I have the first. I'm going to ask you a question about Regression because that's the new book that's coming out tomorrow, as you said. So my question is, where did the idea for Regression come from?
So this is a book that's been with me for a long time. My dad was a professional hypnotist, and he performed on stage for many years. And eventually he stopped performing on stage, but he would still do these sort of private group sessions. And during those sessions, he would often do past life regressions, where he would hypnotize someone and take them back through major moments in their life, back to their childhood, back to their very early childhood, and then would take them back even further than that to times before they were born into this life. And whether you believe in reincarnation or not, it was some of the most intense, surreal things I've ever witnessed. And it's haunted me. Those sessions have haunted me all my life. So I've been thinking about doing a horror comic dealing with past life regressions. The idea being, what if someone has regressed into a life that was really horrible, where something really ghastly was going on, and what if something followed that person back when they were awakened from their hypnotic trance.
That's an interesting thing. I just want to ask a follow-up question to that real fast. Do you believe in past lives? What would you? Do you have any ideas of what your past lives would have been?
I have no idea what my past lives would have been, but I do think. I think maybe I believe. I think it's a situation. There's more things in heaven and earth ratio, and I feel like there have been moments where I doubted, and I thought maybe that wasn't the case, or maybe I'm just fooling myself. But after witnessing some of these regressions my dad did, it's hard to it's kind of hard to argue against for me. And if nothing else, I really want to believe.
All right, Kat, I think has a question for you.
Yeah. So my first question is, what was the process of pitching this story to Image? Like, how did you know Image would be the right company to tell this story?
Well, I've wanted to work with Image for years, and I've been talking with Eric Stevenson at Image for several years now about finding the right project to work with them on. And this is actually, Regression is not the first book that I've had accepted by Image, and it just happens to be the first that has that reached a point where we could release it. And a big part of that, was with artist Danny Luckert. He was very, very, very dead set that it was going to be Image that published this book. So I wanted to work with Image anyway. Sometimes because you're working with, an artist who does need to make ends meet while they're producing the book. And this is a book where we're not getting paid a page rate to produce it. Everything's sort of on, based on the sales of the title. It can be hard to get an artist who is, who wants to, put that time and effort in for something like that. But Danny was very excited about it. He was really interested in going with Image, so I was happy to pursue that with him.
Cool. Mike, you have a question?
Yeah. And thanks, Cullen, for coming on the show. It really means a lot to us.
Well, just before your question, you'll notice I want to show you how much how excited I was to be here with you guys. Behind me, usually it's full of books and statues, and now it looks like an empty hovel. That's because I had a flood this week, and everything had to be moved out of my office. So I'm sitting in the sad, desperate remains of my office.
Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about the empty spinner rack. I'm like, what, do you just collect spinner racks in the background?
I'm not trying to make a statement on my life. This is just what it looks like right now.
Well, we thank you for coming on after, flood definitely could put your life upside down.
Right.
Yes, but this is about half my house looks like this, so it's.
That's funny. Oh man. Well, good luck in fixing everything.
Thanks.
All right. So my question was, let me see here. I think I lost it for a second. Oh, okay. With Regression, does this story have a definitive ending? Do you have an end in sight, or is it something that you're going to continue to write as long as you can write it?
Insight. I kind of live by this motto that the best stories have an end, planned out. It's a little bit loose in terms of when we'll get to that ending. We've got that lasts for hundreds of issues. I mean, it has a we're working from the very first issue to a definitive end of the series. But I can't tell you how many issues that's going to be just yet.
Of course. Right. Yeah, no, I understand. Because I know, for instance, when I read Chew and Kat read Revival, there was always this definitive ending, and actually I think John Layman, when he actually was writing Chew, he had an idea, and I was like, man, how can you have an idea 60-something issues down the road that this story is going to end? And he was right. It ended at 64 or something like that. And I was like, wow, man, that's crazy. But yeah, it's cool though, to have an ending, but it's you just don't know yet.
Yeah. It's something like I did a book called The Sixth Gun with Oni Press, and that book ran 50 issues. But we knew what the last issue was going to be from the time we were working on the first arc. And the same with the book The Dam that I'm doing. We know what the end will be. We're not as sure the number of issues it will be, but it's it definitely is working towards a climax. And I just feel like for me, you know, having an ending that I'm working towards is nice. It's I don't want to call it a safety net, but it definitely helps shape the story and give the story a little more weight as it goes
Right.
on.
Is that harder for superhero comics to kind of have that ending, or is it just like for your indie books you really have that?
Yeah, it was for superhero books. It's a lot more difficult. Those are a little more difficult to plan, really. It seems like a lot of the times I'll plan. You know, I always have these sort of big, grand plans for all my superhero books, and I don't always get to reach that ending. You know, there are events that come up, and that kind of moves things around, and you know, then titles end based on you know, publisher directives and things like that. So I don't always get to reach the end that I have planned for my stories. I kind of have to pivot quite a bit on some of those.
All right. Brant, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm actually going to jump ahead with my question, only because you mentioned the Sixth Gun. I had a question about that. Are there any hopes for the TV show, or is that kind of dead in the water at this point? Because I know it was considered by a couple of networks, right?
Yeah, it was considered by a couple of networks, a couple of movie production companies. NBC shot a pilot, so there was a pilot episode that was made. He decided not to take the pilot to series. But if it were to go at this point, it's basically would go back to square who were in the original pilot were, you know, they've moved on to other projects now. So it would definitely kind of be a complete redo. You know, we couldn't just take the pilot that was shot and turn that into a series at this point.
Right. Okay.
All right, Jay, who's next?
I have a question from one of our viewers. We have Kenneth Crowley says, "Hello, Cullen. Thanks for being on the show. My question is, where do you come up with ideas for characters? Where do they come from?"
You know, they come from different places. That, you know, I think most characters, for me, I would say probably for most writers, characters are bits and pieces of people you know in real life, characters you've read about in novels, or people characters you've seen on TV shows or whatever. And you know, for me, I kind of draw from a number of places, and I don't know that I could ever say this character. I don't know that I could ever directly correlate a character to a certain person or another fictional character. But definitely most of my characters are sort of amalgams of people I know or other characters I've read about or watched on TV.
Cool. He also has another question. His second question is it hard to write for DC, Marvel, or independent publishers? And I want to add on to that. Is it a different process for you as a writer to like when you go into it to write for a big two versus an indie or a creator-owned project?
I guess first of all, writing something, you know, writing a creator-owned book versus writing a book that is owned by Marvel or DC, for instance, they scratch different itches. You know, Marvel and DC, especially Marvel, these are characters I grew up loving. I mean, I love these characters. So, you know, if you'd have told me when I was a kid that one day I'd be writing an X-Men book, I would have, you know, I'd have flipped out because, you know, X-Men, that was my jam, you know, but the thing that I often describe it like this: when you're working for, you know, Marvel or DC, you think about it as going to a friend's house as a kid. And this friend has a toy box full of the most awesome toys you can possibly imagine. Every toy that you've ever wanted to play with. And you can play with them, but at the end of the day, you have to put them back in the toy box in the exact same condition they were when you took them out. And to some degree, that's what we're dealing with, you know, what I deal with when you're working with Marvel or DC, is I love writing these characters, but they're not my, you know, they don't belong to me. And as much as I love contributing to, you know, the mythology of their world, you know, I'm also, you know, it's a different kind of collaboration because you're working, you know, much more closely with editors. You're dealing with publisher plans for the characters. You're dealing with other writers, other creators who have plans for those characters. So you're working with all of them in a bigger way. With creator-owned stuff, you know, it's us. It's my collaborator and a collaborator or collaborators and I. It's our way, and it's what we want to do with those books and those characters. And we might have an editor, but the editor will offer suggestions. We don't have to take those suggestions. I mean, we can, you know, run with the story we want to tell. Process-wise, you know, my scripts aren't any different for creator-owned versus, you know, a Marvel or DC book. My outlines aren't very different. The only thing process that may be a little different is before I start writing a story for Marvel or DC, I usually will send like sort of a snapshot of the story to my editor so that it can be approved, so that we know, so that I don't spend a lot of time writing a story that won't work in what Marvel or DC has planned for those characters.
Cool. Yeah, because I know, because especially with a lot of the companies, you have like other, like the X-Men, you're not the only one who's writing Cyclops right now. He's in Champions and all that. So you have to pay respect to what they're doing. So I was just wondering how hard that is for a writer to play in that schoolyard.
You know, some days are better than others, I guess. You know, there are times where I might be working on a story, or that even in the brainstorming stage where I'm getting real excited about a story. And there's always that possibility that it just won't work based on, you know, what's already in the works. You know, I don't necessarily know what is going on, you know, down the road with Champions, and I have to make sure. So a story I'm trying to work on with Cyclops, for instance, may not come to fruition because it may conflict with something that is already in the works, whether that's with, you know, Champions or whether it's with some other, you know,
X-Book.
It can be anything. So that's one of the reasons I usually do those snapshots up front, so it can be shared with not only with, say, the X office, but with the office that's dealing with Champions and the office that's dealing with Avengers and everything else. Because if these ideas touch other, you know, it's a shared universe. So if an idea touches other books, it has to kind of be.
Cool. Let's see. Brian, do you have another question for Cullen?
Yeah. Going into Regression specifically, and many of the other books you've written, is it safe to say that books with a horror bent are kind of your preferred arena, your preferred genre?
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. I mean, even a lot of my superhero stuff kind of will sometimes veer into horror territory. You know, if you look at a book like Magneto, which I did for Marvel, you know, a good portion of that book is really sort of a horror story with Magneto as the monster. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I ever set out, you know, it was never, when I was younger, that was not necessarily what I wanted. It wasn't that I wanted to write horror stories, but somewhere along the line that just sort of, that's where I started, my taste in reading kind of, you know, went in that direction. My taste in movies, so naturally my taste in storytelling kind of moved in that direction too. And it's I don't want to ever just be a guy who's writing only horror stories, but I definitely feel more comfortable there, and I feel like I can do a better job of getting an emotional reaction from readers in that area.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mike Spires, so you have another question?
Yeah. You've written a ton of stuff. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So my thing is do you have, and you mentioned the X-Men earlier, but do you have a favorite character that you have written or a favorite story arc? For example, like one of my favorite story arcs from you that you wrote was from the Venom series, and you did the oh my God, this was it, the Savage Six storyline from that. So I really enjoyed that portion of Venom, probably the best out of that whole series that you wrote. But do you have a favorite character or favorite story arc that you've written, or story in general?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could pick any one that is my favorite, but if we're talking, say, like Marvel stuff, you know, if we're talking everything, you know, the Sixth Gun is always going to be kind of near and dear to me because it's a story that we took to its natural end and we did it our way all the way through. If we're talking about, you know, Marvel stuff, I love writing Magneto. I was really proud of that Magneto series that we did, and I wish it could have gone a little longer. And that's probably one of the reasons I fight to put Magneto in all of the books I write right now. I also, you know, it doesn't surprise me with your handle there that the Venom stuff is you know, appeals to you. And actually one of the Venom stories, and I like working on the Savage Six story, but the story with Eddie Brock and Flash Thompson kind of meeting, the Venom and Toxin arc, is my favorite from that Venom run, and I think back on that arc very fondly. But you know, there are issues that I love in almost everything. Every series I've written, there are issues that I love. There are probably issues I don't love in everything that I've written too, but those are a couple that jump out, you know,
that's cool.
That are top of mind for me.
So now we know why we see Magneto in X-Men Blue.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be in everything now.
It's funny you mentioned the Eddie Brock issue, because we were just talking about that last week. We were just mentioning about that arc, because I said Eddie made kind of peace with Flash in that, where he's like, I'm watching you.
Yeah.
And then he left. So we were just discussing that last week. So that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's
you like that issue.
And that's one of the things, you know, when you're dealing with you know, a Marvel or a DC book, you know, I lay these seeds out there. And yeah, Eddie saying, you know, Eddie being Toxin and saying, I'm watching you, Flash, is, you know, when I left that series, that was there for other creators to take and do something with if they wanted. No one did. You know, I think I don't know that we ever saw Eddie as Toxin again, but I can't remember.
Yeah, he was in the Carnage book.
Carnage book.
So he was still Toxin in Carnage. You know, I jokingly, you know, one of the characters I introduced in that series, Mania, is a character I really love, and much like Magneto, is a character I pitch for everything but she hasn't shown up in any of my books since that issue. But I remember there's an issue where I kind of establish it that Flash is sort of a father figure for Mania, and then he's always going to be there for her. And then you know, the next thing you know, he's being taken off into space. He abandoned somewhere on Earth.
He's not a good.
So that's just
figure.
Sad ending for Mania, but hopefully we'll see her again.
It was not a positive experience for Mania, but that's one of the things you deal with. You know, other writers can, you know, take these ideas and run with them. They're there, and you know, I usually, you know, I look for those things when I'm taking over a character that I haven't written before. I try to look for those little threads that I can pick up on and do something with. And you know, sometimes I get to, and like I said, sometimes other writers do those things, and sometimes they are forgotten or swept under the rug.
I thought Sinestro, you did a nice job with that series too. I thought you wrote him really, really well. I enjoyed that book.
Yeah, that's a series I was really happy with. I had big plans. The only thing that kind of makes me sad about Sinestro is there were such big plans for where that was going to go, and it just it didn't.
And Rebirth,
it didn't happen.
yeah, Rebirth.
Yeah.
Kat, you have a question?
Yeah, so this is for Regression. We actually were able to read the first issue, and one of the characters I really connected to was Molly, because I thought she was a really cool anger character. So I'm wondering if she's going to be important as the series goes on, or is she one of those just issue 1 characters and that's it?
No, Molly is my favorite character in the series, and she is extremely important to the series. I mean, as far as in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like Molly becomes almost the main character in the book, even more than Adrian, as the series goes forward. It's Regression's a book that we wanted to tell a certain kind of story, or we wanted it to seem like we're telling a very specific kind of story going, in the first few issues. But it kind of takes a big turn 4 or 5 issues in, and becomes a completely different kind of book, where it's sort of it's a pretty straightforward, almost a Jekyll and Hyde type story initially. It becomes this sort of horror conspiracy and this big horror mystery going forward. And yeah, Molly is a big part of that, mystery, and she has a very important role to play in the series. So yeah, she is not a throwaway character. She's in every issue, and her role just gets more and more important.
Well, now I'm even more excited to read it, because again, sometimes you get that with the first issue. It's like, oh, you need an anchor character. Let's just do like a best friend character. So I'm really happy to hear that she's going to be really important.
Molly's my favorite character in the book. That doesn't necessarily bode well for her, because I'm often the cruelest to my favorite characters. But yes, she's sticking around for a while.
Very cool.
To go off of that a little bit, you have characters like Molly in the book. Will we be seeing maybe or any of the other characters' past lives in Regression, or is it just Adrian's?
Yeah, you'll be. I mean, I'm trying to think what I can say here without spoiling what's going forward. But Adrian's is not the only past life we'll be seeing, and you may not see it in the way you're expecting, but this idea, there are a lot of philosophies when it comes to reincarnation, and one of the ideas is, a couple of the ideas that I play with in this series is that everyone you ever meet, you have met before in a past life. And that's, a lot of people say, well, that's why when you meet someone right away and you have an instant connection with them, it's because you had a connection with them in a past life. Or if you meet someone and you instantly dislike that person for no apparent reason, it's because you've had some connection with them in the past, and you just, there's some animosity between you in the past. And then the other thing that we'll definitely be playing with in the series is that time is an illusion. And that not only do we live multiple lives, but we're living all of those lives at once. And it's almost as if reality has partitioned us in such a way that we can't see, we're not aware of those other lives that we're living at once. So, I mean, it is quite possible going forward in Regression, we're not only going to see past lives, but we can also see future lives. And it's going to be something that it gets really trippy as it goes along. I don't want to rush into the trippiness, because I don't want it to derail any decent story or character. I want people to connect with the characters before we get too trippy.
It was pretty trippy in the first issue. I was like, whoa, what's going on here?
And it's all in a good way.
Trippy in the first issue. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's in a good way. Trust me. It definitely, when you get done reading it, it's like, you're kind of like, I really need to see what's going on in this guy's life. Like you want to go see what's going on in his mind.
So Jay, who's next?
I have some viewer questions here. We have Tevia Smoker says to Cullen Bunn, how did you come up with the story, and how did you go about writing Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe?
So Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe it was early on in my career at Marvel, they tried me out with a couple of short Deadpool stories, like 6-page stories and 8-page stories. So I had already written a few, short Deadpool books or stories. And then an editor called me from Marvel and said, "Hey, Cullen, we have a series. We want to call it Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe." And all they had was the title. And they said, "You can do whatever you want to with this, as long as it follows that title." And my initial pitch was that I wanted to write that story as if Deadpool was sort of a Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees type character. And I really wanted it to be a dark book. And then I worked in some twists of why he wants to kill people and everything like that. But that was my guiding star really for that book, is I just wanted to tell a slasher story with Deadpool as the slasher. And I wanted it to be something that if you were laughing, it was a little uncomfortable, because humor, while I'll write humor, it's not I'm not necessarily the guy to write knee-slapping jokes and everything. I wanted to write it where the funny parts were really funny because it's a little dark and a little uncomfortable. It worked. I've said elsewhere, I was surprised at the reaction to the book. I was surprised at how successful that series was and still is. It's still, when I go to a convention, it's the book that I sell out of first. It's still a bestseller for Marvel, and it's spawned a couple of sequels. It's spawned Deadpool Illustrated and Deadpool Kills Deadpool, and now I'm actually working on a new series called Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe again, which is not a sequel in any way, shape, or form. It's not connected to the original series. It's a new standalone series. It's just the Marvel Universe has changed a lot. So we're going to have Deadpool kill the new version of the Marvel Universe in even more terrible ways.
Oh my God.
And it has its own twist. There's sort of a mystery behind this series as well. But I think readers, when they catch on to it and figure out what's going on, will get pretty excited about where it could go. It's going to be a fun book. Just to give you an example of how, in the second issue of the original series, I kill Spider-Man. Spider Slayer, you can probably appreciate that. And that was the death that I got a lot of flack for. A lot of readers really put me to task over killing Spider-Man, because I kill him real quick. I mean, he gets shot in the face and dies pretty quickly. And I got a lot of heat for that. So, in the second issue of Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe again, I'm killing the entire Spider family. Every character with a Spider-Man connection. That's their death issue, and it's really a cruel comic. Let's put it that way. I'm not kind to any of these characters.
And I have to pick up that issue. I just got so excited. I want to see, is it going to be a Spider-Verse thing that you're going to kill off everyone in alternate realities, or is it just going to be 616? It's not really called 616 anymore, but anyways, is it just 616 characters?
Kat is a Spider-Girl fan, and she wants to know if you're going to kill Mayday. That's her big concern.
You're going to kill off Mayday.
Don't care about the other spiders, as long as you don't kill Mayday.
But also maybe kill up Mayday, that way she's in a comic. I might be okay with that.
You want her dead just so she can be in a comic.
It's interesting because when I was writing Fearless Defenders, one of the earlier books I did for Marvel, I was really lobbying hard for Mayday to be a star in that book, and unfortunately, it got canceled before I could make that happen. But that was our third arc story. Was going to be a Mayday Parker story. She was going to come into the Marvel universe and be a part of the series.
That was one of my favorite ones. I love that.
Love that. Hopefully one day you'll be able to write Mayday. That'd be great.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, it's it's one of those things. And when those things don't happen, I file them away, and I try to remember, when is the time going to be right to strike on those kind of stories.
We have another question from a viewer. This is from DNGN. He says, can you tell us what type of monsters inspired the type of stories you put out today? Regression, Monsters Unleashed, Harrow County, etc.
I don't know. I just like monsters. It's it's different for different books. Harrow County is heavily, the creatures in that book are heavily inspired by the areas I grew up in. I grew up in the country. There were my dad and my uncles were always telling me stories about haints that lived out in the woods and witches. So that book is firmly rooted in those kinds of stories, to the point that Harrow County, for instance, is not a book that I would ever introduce, say, a dragon into, because it doesn't fit into that mythology. It wouldn't feel right to have a dragon show up. With Regression, there's are much more influenced by sort of demonology and just the sort of the what I consider sort of the most grotesque what I can imagine is the most grotesque embodiments of evil, and Regression. Those creatures are really horrible and disgusting, and they're heavily insect driven. There's a lot of insect imagery in that series. And like for Monsters Unleashed, that's a much more fun one for me, because the original miniseries for Monsters Unleashed, all those creatures were the creations of guys like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. They were the classic Marvel monsters. But then towards the end of the series, we introduced a new group of monsters that I created, and those were heavily influenced by Godzilla movies and Gamera movies, and even watching anime like Evangelion. Those kind of things, and sort of just giant monsters in general. I'd say everything I work on, most of those series, the creatures are inspired, by one corner of my life, or one corner of something that I love, and I try to stick very closely to those things.
Cool. I know Brant has a question that kind of feeds off of your insect theme. So, Brant, you want to ask that question?
Yeah, sure. I was just wondering, I mean, now that you mention it, of course, if there's a deeper meaning behind the insects, or if it's just because they're creepy, and if there is a meaning, if we're going to get that revelation within the story.
First of all, yes, they are very creepy. Insects are creepy, and they live in a very violent world. But there is a deeper. There's both a symbolic meaning that we'll kind of be exploring in the series, but then there's also in the mythology of the world of Regression, there's a reason insects are so prevalent, and we reveal that in issue 7. It's kind of we get really heavy into sort of the mythology of these demons and why they're connected to insects in such a way.
Cool.
Okay. Cool.
We have a few more questions from the viewers that I wanted to get in.
Sure.
Let's see. We have Sweet Exorcist says, writing Aquaman again.
Is that all it says? Writing Aquaman again?
Yes. Would you ever consider writing Aquaman again? I'm sorry.
Oh, if I ever consider writing Aquaman again.
Yes.
I consider it, and I wake up screaming from a cold nightmare sweat of imagining writing Aquaman again. You know where I said earlier that I write these characters and then I want to write them again and again? Aquaman is the opposite of that. I don't story. I don't ever want to think about Aquaman. And no, I have no interest in writing an Aquaman story again.
Why is that?
So, you know, when I wrote, I don't know how many issues of it. It felt like 3,000 issues. But I wrote a few issues of Aquaman. And, you know, when I got the project, I said, wow, I'm going to be inspired by my favorite Aquaman run of all time, which was Kurt Busiek's Sword of Atlantis. Because I thought everyone with half a brain would love that series because it was so awesome. Well, apparently nobody liked that. And they liked what I did even less. You know, and that's not true. I had a lot of people who liked my Aquaman story. But people who really loved Aquaman, the diehard Aquaman fans, did not care for it. And they were particularly cruel. You know, I got a lot of emails, a lot of private messages about how much I sucked because of what I was doing with Aquaman. And that's me saying, you know, I wrote metrosexual Lobo, and the Lobo fans were nicer to me than Aquaman fans were. So that's saying a lot. So
we called him the Adam Lambert of
well,
Lobo. Adam Lambert Lobo.
Yeah, I still, you know what? I still like that Lobo. I'd write him again in a heartbeat. I enjoyed writing Lobo quite a bit. But and I'm fine. I know that some characters and can get very angry when their characters change in some way or the story's going in a direction they don't like. I'm fine with that. But in addition to that heat I was getting from fans, it was not an enjoyable project to write. I mean, there were so many strange edicts from up on high, like Aquaman can't be in the water. And, you know, Aquaman and Mera have to be broken up, and she has to want to kill him, and she has to be killing innocent people. Even though in another book she was in the Justice League and was a hero. And when I brought that up, the response was, "Well, figure out a reason that works." So, so it was just a pain in the ass. It was. I enjoyed I enjoyed the editor that I worked with. I thought he was great, but I feel like he might have been dealing with some edicts from up on high that honestly just didn't make a lot of sense. So because it was it wasn't enjoyable for me to work on, and I was getting all this heat from readers, it was not worth me staying on the book. You know, a lot of people said cruel readers drove me off the book, and that's not the case. It's that it wasn't a fun project for me. And if I'm not enjoying it and readers aren't enjoying it, then why bother? You know? Yeah. Care. You know, just deal with, you know, I'm fine with that. but in this case, I was having a terrible time, and readers weren't enjoying it. So it was just better for me to move on. But no, I have no interest in writing Aquaman again. Ever.
That's funny.
We have some Barrett says, "Hello, Mr. Bunn. I just want to say that X-Men Blue is the first series you've written that I'm reading, and I'm enjoying a lot 2 issues in."
Well, first of all, thank you. Second of all, go try some other books that I've written because they're all super awesome. But I appreciate that.
You an Aquaman?
Because you know, X-Men Blue, I'm trying to write it in such a way that people who haven't read my stuff can jump right in and enjoy it, and who haven't read X-Men can jump right in and enjoy it without having to. X-Men Blue is really a love letter to classic X-Men stories, but I wanted to write it in such a way that you don't have to be too familiar with those stories to enjoy the book. So that's great, and yeah, thank you. I've been really happy with the response to X-Men Blue has been very humbling.
Yeah, I think from the first issue, I enjoyed it so much because I think it's the first time I've actually heard the classic X-Men voices since they came into the new into present day. It's the first time I actually heard their voices, because I'm a long-time reader of X-Men, so it was the first time I really heard like them all being in character for me. So I really appreciate that.
Well, and you know, as much as I love those characters, you know, being completely honest, when they approached me about writing this book, you know, my first reaction was, these aren't my X-Men, because, you know, I came onto X-Men, you know, around the time it was the classic Claremont and Byrne X-Men is when I started reading. And that's my X-Men team. When I think about the X-Men, it's you know, that era and going forward. So when they came to me about the, you know, writing this series with the original 5, I was a little hesitant because I wasn't sure if I was the right guy to do it. But then as I started working with the characters and planning these stories going forward, I really came to, you know, I really love these. I mean, I've always liked them, but now I have a different kind of appreciation for them. And the stories I'm putting them in are very much, you know, sort of classic X-Men stories from my era. You know, they're dealing with some, you know, they're dealing with adventures and problems that are not what you would necessarily associate with, you know, pre-Giant Size X-Men #1, you know, X-Men teams. It's a different kind of book. In fact, issue 3 comes out tomorrow, and there's a surprise villain shows up who I'm really excited to see what people think of this villain showing up in this issue.
Is it, since this is, I think it's a double ship book, is it hard, the workload, to have a double ship book with X-Men being like such a big franchise?
It's, I mean, it has, double shipping has its challenges. You have to work, obviously a lot more, you're on a tighter schedule with the books. I work ahead, so I'm pretty far ahead on actual scripting. The challenges with double shipping is if you get into a situation where you're having different artists working on 2 different arcs at the same time, which could mean, you know, if I'm not careful, and I've been in these situations in the past, I could be writing the first issue of arc 3 and the first issue of arc 4 at the same time. And then there's connective tissue that you have to make sure, you know, one misstep in that situation and the 2 stories don't mesh, and things kind of fall apart. So that's the only thing you kind of have to worry about. I'm getting art, you know, I get artwork more free at a more rapid pace. And, you know, I'm doing lettering drafts where I compare my script to the art as it comes in and make sure everything meshes up, make sure I didn't, you know, I need to change some dialogue and things like that. I get those on a more rapid pace. So I don't know if it's necessarily more difficult, but it's something I have to stay aware of as we go along.
Is it? I have a real quick question.
Yeah, I was going to ask Mike if you have a question.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of piggyback on Kat's thing. Seems like you have a lot of books to write. How challenging is that to balance all those issues out? Because how many books are you currently writing right now?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what I'm writing. It looks a little heavier than it really is. I always say that. Because some books I'm already done with. You know, Darth Maul, for instance, I'm not writing that anymore. I've been done with that for months and months.
Right.
And Regression even is written so far ahead that I don't have to, you know, I don't have to write a script. You know, I don't have to be right on top of that script to make sure we're meeting our deadlines, because we're well ahead on that series. That said, I'm also always trying to come up with new ideas and new stories, so it's not like I don't have plenty to do. But usually I don't have difficulty keeping the story separate and keeping the characters separate. I don't ever have a situation where I accidentally plug Magneto into Monsters Unleashed or something like that.
Although you might want to. You might want to put Magneto in there.
I do want to put Magneto in Monsters Unleashed. It happens, he'll show up in the book, and we'll just go with it. I just, I kind of try to keep all my notes organized. That's honestly the biggest problem for me with that is I work on, I work longhand most of my outlines because most of the heavy lifting for me comes in the outlining stage. By the time I get to a script, I've outlined and outlined and outlined to the point that I know exactly what's going to be happening in the script, so it goes very quickly. But I have frequently, this is the only thing I can't seem to master. I still frequently misplace my outlines. So I'll work diligently on an outline for something, and then I can't find it. And I'll lose hours trying to dig up this outline again. And it seems like it would be an easy thing to keep track of, but somehow I have, I just have a couple of notebooks that I really work with, but somehow I still manage to pick up some spare notebook somewhere and start doing my outlines in that, and I'll misplace it. So that's really the biggest thing for me is I'll misplace my outlines because I don't organize them probably as well as I should. But other than that, then I keep everything very organized in terms of character descriptions and try to work on. There's never a time where I'm working on at the same time where I have them both on my screen and I'm writing two scripts. I work on one script and get it to where it needs to be, and then I'll work on, another if I need to. But I don't usually bounce back and forth in one day between a couple of different scripts unless there's some sort of weird scheduling reason to do that.
Right. Yeah, it's good to know. It's always interested to see how an artist or a writer actually does that many books at one time. It's kind of mind-boggling in a way.
Well, I mean, no doubt this is the busiest I've ever been. Part of it, if I didn't love it so much, I wouldn't do it. I couldn't maintain the schedule that I maintain because I work long hours, and but I love doing it. It's not, this is what I've always wanted to do. It took me so long to break into comics. I mean, it took me forever. And now I feel like I'm making up for lost time. And another part of it is I kind of need to learn. That's super hard to do when you're dealing with characters that you love so much. I'll say, well, I'm going to say no to any project that comes up. And then if someone calls me and says, hey, do you want to write a Man-Thing story? Well, of course I want to write a Man-Thing story. I'm not going to turn that down. And, it's very difficult for me. I mean, frequently now to projects than I have in the past. And that every time I do, I shouldn't be turning down these amazing opportunities to write stories.
Kat, you have a question?
Yeah. Well, I had another question, but I think now that you brought up, what was the process of breaking into comics for you? Because you said it was a long process. So what was that process? I know that, that could be a 100-hour story, but.
For years and years, I've wanted to write comic books. I wanted to tell stories. But since I loved comic books so much, that's one of the ways I wanted to. Clue. I went to school. I have a degree in creative. I didn't teach when I was getting my degree is how to actually break in, and that's how to get a publisher to pay attention to your work, and that was what I really wanted. That's what I needed the help with, because going into comics, I had no clue how to submit to editors. I had no clue how to introduce myself. I was sending proposals for stories in to Marvel and DC, and I was getting, my rejections because I was going about it the wrong way. What finally did the trick for me was I was working at a comic book store long ago, and I was working with one of the guys I worked with was Brian Hurt, who was an aspiring artist, and we we became friends, and we started talking about doing stories together. It took several years for that to happen, but we finally started pitching stories together, and we were pitching to Oni Press. We pitched a book called The Damned, and Oni Press picked that up. So that was my first professional comic book work. And I thought, which a lot of people, I think a lot of people in that position would think, once I got my first book out, everything else is gravy. From that point on, I'll be rolling in job offers, and I'll be writing every character I ever wanted to write. And that didn't happen. It was still several more years. Brian and I did a book called The Sixth Gun together, also for Oni Press. And that book started getting attention from other editors. So my first Marvel work was I was contacted by an editor at Marvel that had read Sixth Gun and said, "Hey, would you want to write a 6-page Deadpool story?" And my first DC book was an editor at DC reached out to me through Twitter and asked if I wanted to write a 4-issue arc of Superman and Batman. So the Sixth Gun, doing a book that was solely my own, along with Brian Hurt, something that was very true to who I am as a creator, was that's what opened the doors at Marvel and DC, was them seeing a book that I had completed, getting a good idea about who I was as a creator, and taking that and then offering me a chance to work with Marvel and DC. And from that point, then I was able to, not long after that, I was able to quit my day job and focus solely on comics.
It's cool.
Cool. We're going to start to wind down, so we're going to answer our last questions. Brent, you have a final question for Cullen Bunn?
No, actually, I don't. He's answered all the questions I had.
Oh, okay. How about Mike?
Me too, Jay. So,
Mike, you have another question?
Yeah, I'm good. I got all my questions answered.
All right. Then I guess I'm the only one who has another question, and my question is something you touched on earlier, but Mike asked the opposite of what I wanted to ask. What's the one character that you haven't written that you really want, that if you got the chance, you would be like, I'll drop every book I'm writing right now to write this one character. This is my golden fleece,
Wow. That's a tough one, because this year, the last year, 2 years, I've been given the opportunity to write a lot of my bucket list characters, with X-Men in particular. I still have a lot of love for the supernatural side of both Marvel and DC. And I would love to, I'd love to write some of those supernatural characters. I'd love to write, like a Werewolf by Night, or Man-Thing, or any of those Marvel horror characters. Midnight Sun. I've talked a lot about wanting to do a reboot of the Midnight Suns franchise for Marvel and stuff like that. And the same with DC. There's Etrigan the Demon, and Swamp Thing, and basically all the Swamp characters, regardless of the publisher. I'm down.
You can make a team. You can make a whole team of Swamp characters.
That's right. I'd be down for the Swamp characters. But yeah, any of those sort of darker horror characters in Marvel and DC, I'd love to get a chance to do something with.
Cool. And all right, as we're winding down, I just wanted to ask, what else do you have coming up from your creator-owned projects or from the big?
Well, with creator-owned, I'm still doing Harrow County from Dark Horse, and it's a book I'm real excited about. I'm very proud of that book, I'm just as proud of it as I was of the Sixth Gun. But I'm also, I mentioned The Damned earlier, which was my first professional work. We actually returned after 10 years to The Damned. Brian Hurt and I are now working on that series again. and we just released the original series as a new trade paperback at like $9.99 price point. And we just relaunched a new ongoing series of The Dam that picks up where the trade left off. That's kind of nice. Since we did that book, we wanted to return to it. We always had a story we wanted to tell and weren't able to tell back in the day. Now we have a chance to get back to that and do the book we always wanted to do. And then I've got, Regression from Image. Recently, Boom announced a series called The Unsound, which is sort of a haunted house story set in an insane asylum. It's super creepy. Maybe the creepiest book I've ever written. Not necessarily the scariest, but definitely the creepiest. And then I'm also doing, Regression. So my first Image book, the first, hopefully, of many. So that starts tomorrow. And then with Marvel, X-Men Blue kills the Marvel Universe again. That's coming up. And Monsters Unleashed is still out there, still trucking. An ongoing series just launched. It's a series that I think if you liked the mini series I did, the Monsters Unleashed mini series, I believe that the ongoing series is, for me at least, it's over and over again. It's a better series because I just feel like it's just got a, now that we're not dealing with every hero being dealing with this monster crisis, I'm able to focus on certain characters and kind of draw those characters out in a better way.
I like the Monsters Unleashed story. I like the kid, and I think a lot of I love the originality of it, and I think a lot of younger audience can relate to that too, where you just got this kid who can draw on a notepad, and then yet these monsters can come alive. I think that's really cool. I've said this to our, to the Frontline guys here, is my son is 10 years old, and all he does is draw on a notepad all day. And so when I introduced Monsters Unleashed to him, he was like, wow, this is cool. So very original idea. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because, Monsters Unleashed and Kid Kaiju in particular, it's a book that I think, I definitely approach it as a book that longtime Marvel fans can get behind and enjoy. It's a serious book, and they're dealing with serious threats. In the first issue, we see that this Kid Kaiju, this 11-year-old kid, is going to have to be dealing with Mr. Senator, and the Mad Thinker, heavy hitters when it comes to Marvel villains. But it's also a book that I think kids can really enjoy. And can get behind and get excited about. And this, Kid Kaiju is a superhero that, for me, I feel like he has a power that kids can kind of relate to. Because, when I was a kid, I was always drawing. I was always trying to draw. And I think most kids really get into this drawing phase at some point. And even if it's not drawing, it's just the imagination and creativity of Kid Kaiju represents.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're going to be closing out. We want to again thank Cullen Bunn for joining us on this e-panel, and we would love to have him back for any project that he wants to talk about in the future. And be having a review up for Regression tomorrow on here on Comic Frontline. Mike Spireslayer is going to be doing that. We also have check out our live shows by checking out our live stream schedule over on comicfrontline.com, and be sure to check out comicfrontline.com for everything that's going on over there. So this is the end of it. So we're going to just wave goodbye and say, come back to the top 5.